getting us keyed up over there. Are we all set to go?
I believe so.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Todd County Board of Commissioners meeting. Today's date is Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. Time is 9 a.m. All commissioners are present along with a representation from the Auditor Treasurer's Office and the Coordinator. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any amendments to the agenda?
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, I would look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Kneisel, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent items?
Consent items today is a lengthy list. It is license season, that's for sure. A meeting minute approval for February 1st, 2022. A resignation of Connie Spanswick, part-time correctional officer, 12/31/2021. Hire part-time correctional officer Jenna Levine, start date to be determined. Hire Kason Christensen, SWCD, resource conservationist wetlands, start date to be determined. Appoint an office support specialist 1, Taylor Lemke. Appoint office support specialist 2, Abigail Dieters. Appoint an eligibility worker, Mika Jacobson. Gambling permit for the Cavini 4th Degree Knights of Columbus. Gambling permit for Sauk Center Area Chamber of Commerce. Gambling permit for Society of St. Pius X. American Legion 417, Oscar Jacobson, a 1-year club liquor license. Birchwood Resort, a seasonal liquor license. Double Eagle Golf and Grill, seasonal liquor license. Hub Supper Club, a 1-year liquor license. Long Prairie Country Club, a 1-year liquor license. Sauk Center Area Chamber of Commerce, a 1-day temporary on-sale license. Shady's Golden Eagle, 1-year liquor license. And Sylvan Shores Association, 1-day temporary on-sale liquor.
Okay, thank you. You've heard the list of consent items to be approved. I'd look for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve with a question on 4.7.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. Question on which one? Commissioner Becker?
4.7, the
4.7.
financial implication is funding sources, 50% funded and 50% ARPA. My recollection is that whenever we had ARPA funding, there was always an end date for the ARPA funding. Is there an end date?
The understanding, if I can remember back to the initial meeting, the understanding was that through retirements that were going to happen, this position would become part of the regular number of eligibility workers. It would not be in addition to. That was my understanding, and I can lean to Jolene if she has a different understanding of that.
I agree with that. I just don't know if we ever had a idea of a true date.
Should there be an end date on it? You know, in 1 year from today, it would be the end of the ARPA funding, then going forward would be the regular funding? I mean, I think the other ones, the attorneys and the other positions we put in, we had an end date on the ARPA funding.
We did, and the end date that we had with the attorney's office, just for example, that one we said would end in June of 2023, and that was an anticipated date of end from what the district court had said. So with this, we know that the funding is done as of 12/31 of 2024. That could be the end date, or we could ask for them to come back and make a specific recommendation of an end date.
So the hire today would end in 1 year from today?
2024 is the end of the funding.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that the ARPA funding is split in half. We get half for a while and then half again. Am I correct? Or do we get the full amount?
No, we only received half of,
Half.
the first tranche is what we
So that-
received.
So it does run through 24 then.
The total funding runs through 2024 for this type of positions. To clarify that even further, the funding actually goes through 2026 if
Right.
funds are obligated by the end of 2024.
So this employee, we pay ARPA funding for,
Not to exceed December 31st of 2024 for this specific purpose. If you're comfortable with that.
okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, does the Personnel Committee review this?
We did a long time ago, that's
okay.
why I
That-
asked.
okay,
It's been-
When you were chair then?
Yes, it
Okay.
did. And I thought we had put an end date to most of the ARPA funding. That's why when I went through it last night, I was questioning it if there was an end date to this. Or if there should be an end date to it. I mean, is it something we could add?
I think we can. I'm just trying to think of what that immediate language would be for this board action. Like a one-year review, would that be appropriate to add in there that we would do a one-year review of the position?
Of the ARPA, I think it should be, being that we did it with all the other employees we hired through.
That would be a
ARPA.
good wording. I think it's gonna happen before that anyways, the way it sounded, but
Yeah.
that would be good to have in there.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Are you comfortable with that,
Yeah.
Commissioner Becker?
Yep.
And Commissioner Newman, okay? We'll just add the wording in there to review that particular position on a yearly basis for the ARPA funding. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Auditor Treasurer?
The first action from our office this morning is the auditor warrants from January of 2022. The printout has been sent for your review and the warrants for publication are attached. The recommendation is to approve the January 2022 auditor warrants in ACH, manual, and regular formats for a total of $2,477,004.04.
Okay, you've seen the board action, you've had a chance to review the list of the auditor warrants totaling $2,477,004.04. Would look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Kircher, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman, discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Kircher?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes,
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
Thank you. The next action we have this morning for you is to approve the commissioner warrants. Again, those printouts have been provided for your review and the warrants for publication are attached. The recommendation is to approve the commissioner warrants in ACH and regular formats for a total of $71,874.56.
You've seen the board action, chance to review the list of commissioner warrants totaling $71,874.56. Looking for a motion to approve.
so move.
Motion by Becker, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kneisel, discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes,
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Kircher?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
Thank you. The next is the Health and Human Service Commissioner warrants. Again, that background has been provided for your review and warrants for publication are attached. The recommendation is to approve the Health and Human Services Commissioner warrants in ACH and regular formats for a total of $73,807.71.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Health and Human Services warrants totaling the amount of $73,807.71. Looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Newman, is there a second?
second.
Second by Becker, discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes,
Commissioner Kircher?
Yes.
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is the Health and Human Services SSIS warrants. Again, those printouts have been provided for review and warrants for publication attached. The recommendation is to approve the Health and Human Services SSIS warrants in ACH and regular formats for a total of $48,902.29.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Health and Human Services SSIS warrants totaling the amount of $48,902.29. Looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Kneisel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kircher. Discussion. Hearing none. Roll call.
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Kircher?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
And the last item from the auditor's office today is for Benson Air Egg, aerial spraying request. Todd County has received a request from Benson Air Egg, Inc. for permission to perform aerial spraying of tent worms. At this time, the county does not have any legal grounds to withhold granting permission for 2022. See attached letter and excerpt from the FAA regulation. The recommendation is for the board to grant permission to Benson Air Egg, Inc. of Benson, Minnesota for spraying of tent worms in Todd County in the calendar year 2022, with public notification made within 48 hours prior to a spraying event.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have a discussion, please.
Yep, I was going there anyways. Go ahead, Commissioner Kircher.
Well, in the past, we've discussed this, and I've brought it to attention to the board. The county board only acknowledges the performance of the spraying, not giving permission, is my understanding.
That would be my understanding from the past also.
Yep, and that's, if I may, Mr. Chair, in the attachments, the FAA calls on us to grant permission.
Where does it say that?
Yeah. Don't remember how long this is. But it talks about they need the appropriate elected public officials, the governing bodies.
I think it's right above the word general there in the objective. Let's read that once. I think that's got it in it. Doesn't say by us per
The
se.
appropriate governing body over which the aircraft is to be operated has approved the operation in writing.
We're just approving the operation plan, my understanding.
Not sure how it was worded in the past, Jolene, but I know it's more been
This board
approval.
action is a copy paste from the past.
Well, if it is, I've had discussion about it many times.
Every
Yeah.
year, yeah.
And their request.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we change the board action to just
Acknowledgement.
acknowledging it instead of giving permission. And I think there's a liability if we give a little permission. I think we're just acknowledging it, that it's going to happen. So I'll move that change take place in the board action, please.
We can adjust the wording on that, Jolene, to
Certainly,
state acknowledgement instead of granting permission.
certainly, Mr. Chair.
That's a come as a motion, Commissioner
Yes.
Kircher? Okay, we have a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the letter from the spraying of the worms. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Kneisel. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Staples World? I'm not sure who's presenting that. Anybody here? Oh, there you are. I'm sorry. Thank you. If you'd like to come up to the desk and
And do you have the letter that was sent?
we do.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, so I guess you remember there was a mix-up in the letting of the bids for legal notices. And so we're asking if the board could supplement the Staples World, and we would print the legal notices as we have in the past for a reduced rate. it would be about the same rate as we were getting in previous years.
Okay. Is there any kind of a board action drawn up or anything, Jolene, for this at this time or not, or what are we dealing with?
What was written here, Mr. Chair, if I may, the recommendation was to authorize the separate supplemental distribution and publication of legal notices and proceedings in the Staples World publication at a rate of $3.50 per column inch for the 2022 calendar year.
Okay.
Is, I believe, the summation of the request.
I would open it up for discussion ahead of time before I look for a motion, if anybody has any questions or concerns.
I did contact John, the county attorney, yesterday and asked if he would be here. I see he's not here. As far as where the legal, what we can legally do and cannot, being it was on a bid process. Has anybody heard from John?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Becker, yes, he did have a court case right away this morning, and he was expecting to be here at some point during the meeting with no specific time.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, I have some issues with this. Granted, Staples World has been a part of the process in the years past, but I think we heard from Jason, from the leader, that he had made several attempts to contact the Staples World with no response, and I believe our auditor treasurer told us at the time of bid opening that we did not receive a bid from Staples World. The other issue I have is we now are facing a request that we do not have in our budget. And I don't know what the total dollar amount, now we're saying it's $3.50 per column inch, but I don't know what that total dollar amount would be for our budget.
If I may.
Yep.
Denise and I had this pre-alluded thought that you might ask that question. And our best estimate at this time for all of the legal publications in a couple of the departments that budget for those, you'd be in between $5,000 to $10,000. It just depends on the year and the length of the minutes and publications that need to go out.
So my question is, in response is, I have a tough time supporting this without it being in our budget and with being made aware of no responses from the Staples World during our process. And so I have a tough time even supporting this. So at that dollar amount, I just think it's, I think the Staples World should be more responsible in submitting the bids to us. I think it's part of your livelihood, so I would think you would be on your toes about that. So,
Well, I can explain that if you'd like.
sure.
Okay, when the county was budgeting in July, they asked about how much we would raise prices, and I said it wouldn't be more than 1.5% or something like that. And so then I informed the other newspapers of that, and then later in the year, one of them got back to me saying we should raise it by much more than that, by like 3 to 4%. And I didn't know if I could do that, and I felt that was unethical because then they were also asking me to raise the rate on our school board and our city council. And these are people who don't live in our district. And so I had struggled figuring out how to do that. I didn't know the laws about it. And so I didn't get back to them because I didn't want to accuse them of trying to gouge the county. And so I was trying to look up what I could do, and I never got that. I couldn't find the information on it. So, and then it got to be too late. And also I was not aware of a deadline. I mean, apparently Todd County was in contact with the Long Prairie newspaper about a deadline. They never informed me of a deadline.
You ran it in the Staples paper.
What's that?
The deadline was ran in the Staples paper.
In what form?
In legal notice?
Okay, I don't know.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Jolene, could you explain that process when the actual request for bids takes place and who gets notified?
Correct. In December, early December, we sent notification to Staples World to print 2 notices in the legal notification section, which would then be distributed down to the other papers per the 2021 publishing agreement. And in those notices, it states for the official publication notice and the extra publication bid notices, both state the stated deadline and when the bids will be opened.
Okay, well, that's a different person than me who handles those, so I didn't get that.
Any other comment, questions? I think it's really hard to go back on a bid process in a deadline like that. I don't know that we've ever entered into that area before. If there's a deadline, and only my stuff revolves around my outside world of where we're bidding processes, and if you're a minute late, it gets excluded, not days late. So I apologize, but I really hate to try to cross those lines or go into that area, so.
Right, but I was also not informed of the Long Prairie bid, so I feel that was unethical also.
So I would be entertaining a motion to approve or disapprove.
What did the Long Prairie bid, what was there per column? Was it?
The per column is $10.50, but that's a shared bid between the Long Prairie Leader, the Independent News, and the Osakas Anchor is also a supplement inside there.
I guess my question is if we can legally approve this with the bid process that the county has, and what would it then do to the bid process going forward for the county?
Right.
I don't think it would be considered part of the bid process. I think it's just a request for supplemental, so you can get your public notices printed in the Staples newspaper.
And I really see to hate them not being printed, because it is the only paper in northern Todd County, you know, and you do cover a different area than the other papers cover. And so I would like to lead with you saying, yes, it need and should be printed, but with the bid process we go through, I don't know if I can support that.
Oh, I'm not sure the bid process was followed correctly, because I did get to the other newspapers and I proposed a bid to them, and they did not want they did not approve what I had proposed to them. So that was, they were cutting me off instead of me cutting them off.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
there is a bid process that was followed to a T. They were sealed bids received here, opened here during the meeting. The process was followed.
Yes, the process was, but I couldn't submit a bid unless I had the approval of the other two newspapers, and they did not approve what I had presented to them.
You couldn't have submitted a bid on your own,
Not with their names on it.
but you could have submitted a bid strictly from the Staples paper.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it further,
Yeah.
because I didn't know the rules of it.
I would entertain a motion one way or the other.
Mr. Chair, I think our coordinator said our legal advice has not came to us yet on this issue. Is that true?
There was just a brief discussion. Commissioner Becker had reached out, and I have not heard anything.
I have not had an answer back.
I would ask that we table this till we get some legal advice.
I did specifically reach out to the county attorney's office to see if we would have quick response yet today. I have not heard back. So if we wanted to, Julian, just keep me on track with this, can we table this and potentially talk about it later on at this meeting if we do have representation, or do we bring it to the next meeting?
Well, if that's the case, I'll just ask that we postpone discussion until we do get some, during this meeting process, till we get some legal advice. If we don't, then I would later on move that we table it till we do get some, so.
Yeah.
That would work,
I
yes.
think that's.
I think we
that's
can
best.
table with a wait time during this meeting, and if we don't hear back, we can then table to the future meeting. I think that's very acceptable. Okay, so we'll table this at this time.
All right, thank you.
University of Minnesota Extension. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Commissioners, for inviting us to give an occasional update from the U of M Extension County Office. And today I have with me Brenda Miller, who will give a little update on livestock happenings in the last year and some things that she sees and information.
Last year, I was just thinking like this winter, but yeah, that
Okay,
is
okay,
true.
this winter.
It's been a long year, but yeah. So a lot has changed and a lot has adjusted since I met with you guys last time. So a lot of our programs have moved to online, and some of them are coming back to in person. But there are some of them we've had such great success online that I don't think they will ever come back in person, which is okay. But it's been a lot of really great teamwork with colleagues, both at my local level and then the regional and state specialists. But some things that we've been doing, we've had the goat and sheep webinar series. We do that about once a month. Our next one is coming up on February 28th. And we kind of do, whatever is going on in the industry or what people want to talk about. So our January one was on lambing and kidding, which a lot of guys are starting that right now. So that had a really good success. We had over 400 people registered for that one, and it'll be up on our YouTube channel shortly. But we get lots of questions about that every year because that's a pretty important part of your business is making sure your babies are off to a great start. So, like I said, our next one is on February 28th, and then we try to do one once a month. We usually try to do those for both goat and sheep producers, but sometimes they're more tailored to one versus the other. So it just kind of depends on what our topic for the month is on that. So another thing that we have going on throughout this winter season especially, January, February are just crazy with webinars, conferences, workshops, all that sort of thing because guys aren't out in the field. So February has been pretty wild, but we've been really getting a lot of our beef quality assurance trainings done here January, February, both on, well, we've only done 3 online this winter, but we've done probably about a dozen or close to that in-person trainings. So it's really nice to be back in person for those. And so it's a national program that raises consumer confidence through proper, best management practices on farms. And so all but one major packer requires that training for their producers, and not only their producers, but the guys trucking the cattle to them. So they have to have that. And most sales barns are requiring that. I mean, you can get a premium for your livestock if you have that. So it's free. It's good for 3 years. So it's just a really good thing to do. Gary actually attended one of our trainings here this winter, so it was nice to see him and other Todd County farmers at those. So some other things that are coming back in person. This summer we had our summer farm tour for our dairy producers. That was held at Right Way Dairy, which is the Wrightsma family by Sox Center. And this year, instead of doing, we usually do like 10, but we did more 5 and more regional. So Stearns, Benton, Morrison, and Todd County worked together, and we put on one for central Minnesota. We had like 130 plus people there. That's about what I counted, and people kept coming. So that was great. They have De La Val robots, which isn't something that we see around here. We have a lot of Lely robots. So that was really nice. And the interesting thing about the attendees who were there is that you could tell that most of them were actively thinking about putting in robots. So that was really nice to see. We had a lot of great discussion, and hopefully we'll see some more robot barns coming in the future. So I think we're going to continue that sort of teamwork effort going forward because we are getting less and less dairy farms all across the state, every year. When I started, there was about 205, and right now there's roughly like 145-ish here in Todd County. That still makes us the second county in the state for the number of dairy farms, right behind Stearns County, but still it's not like it used to be. So Stearns County has like 400 and some, but guys are retiring. It's really hard to get into the business if you don't already have it in. It's extremely expensive, and then with all of the trucking and, feed costs and machines and everything else. It's kind of a tough business to be in, but it's very rewarding. I grew up on a dairy farm and I miss it a lot of days, but I'm still very thankful for all of our dairy producers here in the county and statewide. Moving on to beef, we have currently a beef webinar series coming up here. It's going to be 4 Mondays in a row starting next Monday the 21st, and we're going to be talking about genetics, taking care of your bulls, selecting your future genetics on EPDs, breeding costs versus AI, all that sort of stuff. I think it's going to be really interesting. I won't be speaking at this one. I'll be running all the background stuff and registration, but we have some great speakers from our U of M beef team that will be on that. We're really excited about that. And it's later at night because I know a lot of guys are starting to calve right now, so they can get all their regular work done, get their chores done, and then come join us from 8 till 9 p.m. And that works good for me too because my kids are in bed by then. So, and my colleagues too who have young kids. I kind of talked all about the goat stuff. After our Todd County Goat Workshop, which was virtual last year again, the producer spotlight, Noah Van Beck, he called me the next day and asked if he could maybe host a farm tour this coming summer at his farm. So I was like, yes, I didn't even have to work to get that one. So I'm pretty excited. So hopefully we will have an on-farm tour at a goat farm this coming summer. In other news, Cow Calf Days was on January 25th. After taking a break, we came back. It was well attended. We had 70 people and then some there. We held it not at the college this year. It was at Timbers Event Center, which was a great venue, actually. It turned out really well. I ended up having to give a presentation on about 12 hours or less of notice, but it went pretty well. I talked about managing stress via setting farm goals. So with everything going on right now, it's really important to have not only personal goals, but goals for your farm. And how do we, manage our stress by working towards a goal, sort of a deal. So there's an interactive presentation, hands-on thing that goes with that. And it seems to go over pretty well. We had a lot of smiles and laughs and stuff. So in other news, it's a private pesticide applicator recertification training going on right now, January, February. If you don't attend a recertification class, you have to do the test either via online or the paper form. We have manuals and tests down in the extension office if anybody needs to do that. And then you just send it in and you'll get your little card back in the mail. I did hear that rules were changing for next year, so there'll be a little bit different process on some of that. Not for the recertifying people, but those who want to take it for the first time. Something about, you'll have to come into the extension office, from what I understand, and we would have to oversee you taking your paper exam. So, but look for more news on that. Things always change every year on that. And then the 4-H has fruit available, the Todd County 4-H. Find your local 4-H'er to get your fruit, and or we have one of these sheets hanging up on the fridge down in the lower level if anybody wants fruit. It's great fruit. I know my kids, they scarf down a box of pears in 2 days. So
And orders are due
March 4th. Yep.
Okay.
So you can talk to Kristen or Alyssa on that if you want to order some fruit.
And your 4-H club is also selling, I think, pizza. Is that right?
So my kids are in Stearns County 4-H, and Stearns County does not sell fruit, I guess, which I was quite surprised. So our 4-H club is selling Harry's Pizzas, which Harry's Pizza is a small family-owned company out of El Rosa, Minnesota. So we're selling pizzas. So it's kind of interesting how every county kind of does different.
And that's an example of how kids that live near the county line can opt into 4-H, that fits with them and their location. So that's a great point to bring up. I wanted to also just say that Brenda is recognized as a leader in beef and dairy. She's also really created quite a leadership in the goat subject. I mean, you hear her talk about that. That's really become something. And there's a lot of demand for goat meat with ethnic groups in the St. Cloud area. And Brenda's working on that with a team, trying to figure out how can there be more local production and a food system with that. So that's exciting.
What would be really nice if, Long Prairie Packing could just make a little goat facility, and then that would solve like all of our problems,
Wow.
but
It would have to be halal and kosher, both. But I mean, gosh, it really
you just
could
need a little
be.
building. I mean, they're not very big animals, so, but
All right,
anyway.
Brenda, can you start working on that?
Yeah.
It's not an overnight thing by any means. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I find it really interesting because the other morning at our coffee talk, in our spot where we stop in the morning and exchange wisdom, meat goat farming was one of the subjects brought up and how popular it is in the area and stuff. So is that growing in Todd County considerably, or has that kind of been here quite a while, or?
So it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I realized that we have quite a number of, like half of the dairy goat farms here. And then it was like a year later that I realized found out that we have a lot of meat goats. And we don't really hear about those very much because a lot of them are, more hobby. But like Noah Van Beck, they have 700, nannies, mature females. But there's a lot more out there than one would think that they are. Yes, there's some commercial. There's a big number of, 4-H'ers and stuff that show or for that purpose, like breeding stock. But the biggest problem is that industry really wants to grow, but we don't have a processing facility for that meat. And yes, we can take a goat to our local locker plants, but the problem there is that those guys can hang a side of beef for, much more economically, where it'd have to be like 4 goats on a hanger, so like, why would they want to? I mean, yeah, it doesn't take very much to process a goat, but, financially it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so.
And on the dairy side, I mean, you've told me that there's a truck now that comes to pick up in this area, or there had been. Is that
Oh,
happening
for the,
still?
yeah, so it used to be Montchevrolet, and then Montchevrolet sold out to Saputo, but they're based out of Wisconsin. Well, Saputo is a Canadian company, but the milk, they'll come up and pick up all the milk here, take it to Wisconsin, and then Stickney Hill and Kimball is another one, but they're not quite as, from what I've heard and what their history has shown, as consistent, and being, yes, we'll for sure pick up your milk sort of a deal. So most of the guys go to Montchevrolet or Saputo.
And I suppose it makes sense for them when they have a group of farms
Yeah.
to come and pick up. So that's twice a week, I think you said, or maybe
I think so,
once.
yeah. And, when we talk about our dairy goat farms, probably 75% of them are Amish. So that brings in a whole different light to some of the ways that we manage that. But they still have to pass, just like a dairy goat farm, the inspector has to come in and inspect their facilities, and they got to pass them too, so.
Here, if I could.
Yep.
At the Region 5 meeting, there has been discussion on getting a meat cutting class going at the Staples Vocational School. Are you aware of that, or is that something that you could
There's a program
done?
coming for CLC and then Ridgewater as well in Wilmer. The meat course or the meat
Yeah.
class, yep. That's
But
coming.
that's a good point, a partnership or something.
To try to get with the goat part of it, yeah.
And there's also a mobile slaughter unit too I was reading about. I don't know if that's on the road yet, but I know that was part of, I
Part
think,
of the
those
discussion.
classes too. Yep.
Yes.
So hopefully we can get more of that coming, and then, maybe that'll solve some of our issues, because I know a lot of our local, they're booked out 6 months to a year, some of them. You can't get in for a cow or pig or whatever, so.
Crazy.
Well, Mr. Chair, that's why I was gonna say, not only is it or goat butchering, it's the cattle and everything else. You can't find locker plants. I mean, they're pretty rare, and if you do find one, they're, like you say, booked up for 6 months, maybe a year or so.
So if you want to get a steer butchered, you
Yeah.
better be looking at a
Yeah.
year in advance for a butcher date.
And that's something that the college could be looking at too, is not only goat, everything, so.
Hopefully, like you said, Commissioner Becker, that will help kids learn how to do that and maybe
Get
take
into a
over
new
a
field.
current one or help,
Right.
yeah.
Interesting.
the demand.
I can butcher a rabbit, but that's about all the more it goes.
That's impressive.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Very
I think we'll
nice.
be back in April with Elizabeth on health and nutrition. So
Sounds great.
Thank you. We'll see you then.
Thanks for the updates.
You see this? Yeah. Thank you.
I guess if we have representation here, I guess I'd like to go back to the Staples World one. I just was wondering if we still have,
He left.
I think
oh, he did, he went down the stairs, huh? I
Put his
thought
coat
maybe-
on and
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for being late. I had a CHIPS hearing this morning that ended up going a half an hour, as they sometimes do. And so I'd like to be here at 9 o'clock going forward, but some days it's out of my control. So I apologize for being late.
No problem.
Here.
We had, yeah, we had, earlier,
Anderson.
listened to a presentation from Staples World in regards to possibly going back and looking at, adding their publication, to the thing. And I think the subject came up was the legality of going back and re-looking at something like that when we had a bid process going through. So that we're looking for advice.
Great. I think the statute is pretty clear about the process for the bidding, and I don't think the statute allows us to give Staples World another bite of the apple. We can't give legal advice to the Staples World, but one thing that occurred to me when preparing for this is there's nothing that prevents the Staples World from negotiating with the Long Prairie Leader to do a side deal that is outside of the board, provided that Staples World has the proper disclaimers in what they publish to say, we're not the legal publication for the county, but we're doing it anyway. But that's out of our purview. And again, I don't want to give legal advice to the Staples World, but there are ways around this without us having another bidding process.
And I guess I would just then ask that if by any means we would look at that, wouldn't we kind of put ourselves in a bad place of ever looking at another bid process?
It sets precedent that we don't want to set.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for. So I would go back to the board action in regards to the Staples World and look for a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's unfortunate that we're in this predicament, but, and it's something I don't want to do, but I really feel strongly that people in the Staples area in the northern part of the county need to know what's going on, but again, the process was not followed, so I'll move that we deny the request.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the request from Staples World. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Kneisel. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
I would just like to make a comment on, with Dave, it's really sad that the northern part of the county will be losing this representation, and hopefully next year it will correct itself.
I believe that was expressed already too, and I agree. Hopefully we can be back on track next year and get it up where it should be. All right, planning and zoning. Morning, Adam.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a comment too, just that it's very nice to have the legal advice right at our right side here that we haven't had for, at least I haven't had, for 16 years as a county commissioner, so thank you.
Thank you, John.
That was handy for us to have.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to make a habit of it.
And thank you, John.
All right.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay, first item here this morning is Lakeside Acres First Edition preliminary plat. A subdivision request to establish a 7-lot preliminary plat on parcel 1500417000, which is in Leslie Township, was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission on December 2nd, 2021. This was remanded back to the Planning Commission during the December 21st meeting, and the Planning Commission reviewed the application during the February 3rd, 2022 Planning Commission hearing, and the final recommendation from the Planning Commission was to approve the preliminary plat with the following conditions. 1, stabilize the gully area between lots 2 and 3 prior to final platting. Stabilization plan, stormwater management plan, and construction must be approved by Todd Soil and Water. 2, placement of a permanently protected drainage easement around the gully area between lots 2 and 3. 3, dedication of a 140-foot cul-de-sac as public road right-of-way. 4, dedication of 20 feet of public drainage easement along the southern property boundary of Feather Drive. And 5, developer and future property owners must obtain appropriate permitting when necessary from other governmental agencies, including but not limited to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Sauk River Watershed District. So the options would be to move to approve the establishment of Lakeside Acres First Edition preliminary plat with those proposed conditions, move to deny the establishment of Lakeside Acres First Edition preliminary plat, and the recommendation would be approval of the Lakeside Acres First Edition preliminary plat with the proposed conditions.
Okay, you've seen the board action in regards to the Lakeside Acres First Edition preliminary plat. Looking for a motion.
I'll move for discussion.
Motion by Newman for discussion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Kneisel. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Kaiser is here from Leslie Township. Do you have anything you want to add to this?
Great that he is dedicating the land for the turnaround and the easement, but I don't think we should set a precedent that we approve preliminary plats based on the fact that we'll dedicate the land, but we want the townships to build the road or the cul-de-sac or whatever. I just disagree with that part of it.
Okay. So it was put in there that the township has to build a cul-de-sac?
Basically, is what it says is that they're dedicating the land for the cul-de-sac.
Well, we've had other plats out in that area where we relied on a developer to furnish the land and build the cul-de-sac.
That's my understanding. We don't, like I said,
Are we changing our way of doing things now? I don't know.
I guess if I could, Mr. Chair, I know, being on the township before, it was always up to the developer to build the road, and then when it was up to specs, the township to vote then to maintain it.
accept it and maintain it, correct?
Okay, and that's usually the process that we went through, so.
But
Is
then
this is
again,
what you're questioning, if that's changing?
the county engineer would have to sign off on that road in order for it to become a final plat to make sure it's up to specs. So my question is, Adam, is
Is that-
who's gonna build this cul-de-sac?
Right now, it's not established who's going to build the cul-de-sac. The developer has agreed to dedicate the right-of-way for the building of it, and it was not specified in the conditions who will be responsible for that. If I may add on to that, the reason that the planning commission felt that this was an appropriate condition is because this road of Feather Drive is an existing public road right-of-way that was dedicated to the public when the plat on the other side of the road was created in 1940 or something like that. So it's an existing public road right-of-way. The planning commission felt that a cul-de-sac or turnaround here was absolutely necessary. They saw the need for that. What they did not see is that in this particular case, that it was solely the developer's responsibility to build that cul-de-sac because it's an existing road right-of-way and there's ownership on the opposite side of the road already. It was not established in the conditions who will be responsible for that. They had mentioned some cost-sharing potentials, bringing in the developer, the folks on the other side of the road, maybe the township, maybe some grants. There was many things discussed, but it was hard to create a condition laying that out. So at this point, the developer had agreed to at least this much of it.
So before the final plat comes in, I wanna make sure that you bring back all the documentation, that all the permits have been received from whether it's Minnesota Pollution Control or the Sauk River Watershed District, that the township is okay with everything, okay? Because we're the final vote right here, the
Right.
5 of us. And whatever decisions we make, it's pretty much final,
Correct.
okay? We just get advice from the planning commission that comes to
Right.
this board. So, like I said, just make sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed
Right.
before
Yep.
we do the final.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
I do agree with Randy a little bit, but disagree a little bit. I believe strongly that it is the planning commission's responsibility to bring this to us in a proper way that we can approve it. And we've seen this over and over. The planning commission leaves a lot of blanks or doubts on what's gonna be done. So my word on this is I would like to send instruction to the planning commission, do your damn job and do it right and get it to us as commissioners so it comes to us so we can approve it or disapprove it. But mainly, we should be approving it because they should be going through all the work to get this done proper.
I agree.
So, I don't think it's Adam's job, I think it's the planning commission's job to be thinking about this. That's what we have them there for.
I sat as the liaison on that committee, and I would like to clarify a couple points. I think there was a question brought to the township during that meeting. The township has maintained that road for how many years, Mr. Kaiser?
As long as I've been on the board.
For 20-plus years, has maintained Feather Drive already for 20 years. There was a question brought at that meeting why that cul-de-sac had never been developed. The answer was, we never had the room. Am I correct? Okay. So if it's available now, it sounded like it would have been developed had they had the room before. So that was addressed by the planning commission.
My only question on that was, how do we go about, as a township, now hiring to get this cul-de-sac put in? When somebody else in our township decides to add on development, so we gotta do this continually now? Build the roads up so that we can get, at everybody's expense, to get this road brought up to specification. Is that what's happening in all of Todd County, that townships are improving their roads so new developments can happen without the cost to the developer? Because maybe the lawyer can answer that, would that set a precedent then that, well, the road is existing, the township or whoever owns the road has to build it now to county specifications?
It certainly would set a precedent.
I believe also a unique thing with things like this is each one that's brought in front of the planning commission, each particular project is looked on uniquely with that project. And I think also we extended out to legal advice from this end of it, asking about the road and the responsibility of the developer. What was our answer, Adam, back from the legal advice?
Well, initially there was a looking at the connection of the two roads across that gully area, and that was a no-go because it was an off-site improvement. The regular stretch of Feather Drive was really not open for discussion either because it's an existing public road right-of-way that's maintained by the township. The only thing that came up was potentially the placement of the cul-de-sac area if the township or some sort of emergency services felt that if the facts supported a need for it. And I think we've established that there certainly was a need for a cul-de-sac, and then the discussion then went to who's responsible for it in this particular case. This particular case is a little bit unique because we're looking at an existing road and making improvements to it. In most cases, you'll see the developer build roads because they are not existing roads. So they're taking that from start to finish, including building of the road.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Ferret Drive, which I live on, okay, had been maintained by the township for 30, 40 years, and my parents come in and backlotted the farm, and they were required by the county to furnish the land and pay for the cul-de-sac on a new development. So what has changed in that last 15 years, Adam? Because it's the same scenario you just explained.
And I can't honestly answer that. I was not here 15 years ago.
What changed?
And I don't have I don't think the rules have changed. I'm taking
Jason
the-
didn't know about it until I talked to him and said, well, is that fair?
Sure, and I present Jason with the application and the information of the case we're looking at.
Okay.
That's what I give to
I
him
just
to
want
make
to bring up
his.
my points.
Right.
Mr. Chair, if I could, we have a development up in northern part of Todd County called Sullivan Shores. And we are still fighting roads from that development, which was partly township roads, partly Sullivan Shores roads. It was all turned over to the township. They're still looking for the roads that were turned over to the township, the ones that were not turned over to the township. These people buy a lot in the middle of the woods and are requiring the township to build them a road now. So it's not just, it's all over the county. And the sooner we get to what's expected from each township, the better off we will all be, because it continues to be a mess.
Mr. Chair, we can't go back and fix what happened 15, 20 years ago, but we certainly, as a board, can move forward with maybe some good guidance, what we expect before it gets to this board. I'm thank you for your comments, because you're there and heard the discussion. But I still think, when it comes to us, I would like the planning commission to say, this is what's gonna happen, this is what's gonna be done, and, you know, these are our recommendations. When you leave it blank that there's some dedicated land, okay, what happens with that dedicated land? Then we're sitting here saying, you know, what if, what if, what if? I want a definite answer from the planning commission that either the township does it or the developer does it, and I'd be happy, because then we know the answer is in the board action. So, that's my only request, so.
So do we want to just table it, send it back to the planning commission?
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We are very near the 120 days. I believe it was the 24th. So sending it back to the planning commission probably is not an option, due to our ordinance has a 10-day noticing requirement, and also the way the newspaper lines up, that's just not gonna work. So tabling it would be okay, but we need to get it back to this board next. It would not be able to go back to the planning commission. We have 9 days. So that would be the only concern to keep in mind there.
So with that, you're putting the pressure back on this board, where we have to make a decision, trying to figure out who's gonna build the cul-de-sac, basically.
I don't know how
Who
to
the hell's
answer
gonna
that,
build the
Commissioner Newman.
cul-de-sac?
It was
Right.
discussed at the meeting that the land was dedicated. It was also stated by the township at the meeting, the only reason that that had not been done was for lack of property. The property has been dedicated. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Ron, you are correct, but I can't make the decision for the town board at that meeting to say, yay, we'll build the road. Granted, our meeting is tonight, but, and if I can bring that to the board and ask them, but we don't do any zoning or planning stuff with your plats. You guys have to decide. You can decide right here that it's our responsibility to build it, if that's what you wanna do. And then we'll have to do it. Right?
This is,
You have no zoning power.
Yep.
this is a road that has been maintained by the township for numerous years. It was stated by the township, the only reason that it was not ever developed was because they didn't have the space. If you want the wording in here changed, directing it to the township, I would be happy to change the wording in here to do so. But,
We, as a county, force a township?
well, that's just it.
I don't think we have the right.
You're asking us to.
I don't believe that the board has the authority to dictate what the township does.
Absolutely
You have the
not.
authority to make a decision based on the application in front of you.
That's what the request is
I think
coming
John
from
would
here,
agree.
saying
So-
that we have that right.
We know that what we have in front of us here is an applicant that's willing to dedicate the right-of-way. The decision that you guys would make is that okay? You can make a decision to have the applicant dedicate, or also build that cul-de-sac potentially. I don't know what is gonna come after that. Or you could deny the application altogether based on thinking, maybe the facts don't support granting of the application at this time. There are options, but I do not believe this board has the authority to dictate what decisions the township makes.
So, Mr. Chair, since I made the motion, I will correct that the developer dedicates the land for the cul-de-sac and also builds the cul-de-sac to county specs. Because that will stay within the precedents that we have set for all the plats. In the last 17 years I've been a commissioner, we have made the developer upgrade the roads. And I don't care how long the township has maintained a road, we have always went in there, whether it's tar it. I know Candota, you don't do anything in Candota Township without tarring the road. Okay? So, and then it has to pass their specs. So I'm gonna leave it at that. And, is that okay with the seconder? Yeah. Okay?
I will make discussion on that point. That is not what was brought forward as intentions from the planning commission.
But I didn't see that in writing, so I don't know that.
I was there, and I
know.
heard it, and I've clarified it with the representation from the township there. We have a motion and a second with wordage changing to put the developer responsible for developing the cul-de-sac.
Roll call, Mr. Chair.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Kircher?
No.
Commissioner Erickson?
No.
So that passes, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I will amend condition number 3 to include the motion as Commissioner Newman had presented it there.
Will the developer have a chance to just pull his request at
Yep.
that point?
Yeah, if they choose to do something different, they can either just not do anything and it'll die after a year, or
Right.
they could make a decision to formally withdraw it with some sort of written notification to the county.
Okay, thank you. 8.2.
Okay, the Lakeside Acres Second Edition Preliminary Plat. The subdivision request to establish a 3-lot preliminary plat on parcel 15-004-0001, also in Leslie Township, was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission on December 2nd, 2021. It was remanded back to the Planning Commission during the December 21st Commissioners meeting, and the Planning Commission reviewed this item during the February 3rd, 2022 meeting, and the final recommendation from the Planning Commission was to approve the preliminary plat with the following conditions. Number 1, all accesses must be approved by the township and shall only be connected to Fern Drive. And 2, the developer and future property owners must obtain appropriate permitting when necessary from other governmental agencies, including but not limited to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Sauk River Watershed District. The option be moved to approve the establishment of Lakeside Acres Second Edition Preliminary Plat with the proposed conditions, or move to deny the establishment of Lakeside Acres Second Edition Preliminary Plat. Recommendation be approval of Lakeside Acres Second Edition Preliminary Plat with the proposed conditions.
Okay, you've heard of the board action, looking for a motion.
So move.
Motion by Newman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker, discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd request that before we do a final plat, that we have all the paperwork from the agencies that permitting.
May be required from.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Energy solar request.
All right. All Energy Solar request for CUP, an application for conditional use permit on parcel 14-0008100 Candona Township, submitted on January 12th, 2022, to establish a ground-mounted community solar facility in AF1 zoning. The request was reviewed by the Planning Commission during the February 3rd meeting. The final recommendation from the Planning Commission was to grant the conditional use with 2 conditions as follows: that the applicant must obtain appropriate permitting and/or licensing from additional government agencies as necessary, and 2, submission of the interconnection agreement with the electric service provider prior to issuance of a land use permit. The option would be to grant the CUP with 2 conditions, deny the CUP, or remand it back to the Planning Commission. And the recommendation would be a motion to grant the conditional use permit with those 2 conditions.
Okay, you've heard the board action for the all-energy solar request for CUP. Looking for a motion.
So move.
Motion by Newman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker. Discussion.
How big of a facility is this?
Oh, boy.
She stated it that night.
80 feet long comes to mind.
It's one of the smaller.
Like 12 feet
It's a
high.
small,
Yes, just a single array of, I thought they said like 40 panels or something like that.
okay, for their own use.
Right, it'll
for-
be, yes, on-site use, interconnection to the electric grid, which is why it comes for a conditional use.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I thought we had some discussion about the dismantling of the units once they're expired or something. Have we just, or is that gonna be in our ordinance, or?
That's-
It's coming up.
Work
in
session
Finger later.
But we're approving something already, so,
This is personal use size versus
okay,
commercial.
Right.
okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Good morning.
Okay, next, the addition of section 9.23, short-term and vacation rentals to the planning and zoning ordinance. The addition of section 9.23, short-term and vacation rentals to the planning and zoning ordinance reviewed by the planning commission during the January 6th, 2022 and the February 3rd, 2022 planning commission hearings. The final recommendation was to adopt the attached ordinance as section 9.23 and also make amendments to the additional sections to provide consistency throughout the ordinance related to this change. Those additional changes would impact section 3.02, definitions, to include a definition for a short-term rental and a vacation rental, and also section 6.04, to identify how these rules would be allowed in each of the corresponding zoning districts. There's an attachment to this board action showing all those individual changes and the full proposed section for 9.23. So the options would be to adopt the proposed addition of section 9.23 and then amend sections 3.02 and 6.04 as presented. Do not adopt or remand it back to the planning commission. And the recommendation at this time would be to approve the addition of section 9.23, short-term and vacation rental, to the planning and zoning ordinance, and amendments to section 3.02 and 6.04.
Okay, you've seen the board action in regards to the adoption of the short-term and vacation rentals in the planning and zoning ordinance. Look for a motion.
So move.
Motion by Becker. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Kneisel. Discussion?
Yes, did you have feedback from people as you were out there
I don't
looking?
think we had anybody from the public that attended to comment on this. The only public comments, I guess, would be the complaints or calls and questions we've received over time, but there hasn't been a lot. There was a little bit of discussion from the planning commission, but everybody seemed pretty positive about what we have presented here and thought it was certainly a good addition to the ordinance.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Emergency management.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members.
Morning, Mike.
I'm presenting you today a letter of support for HF 2821 or SF 2670. Background on this is a letter based on some requests from what the senator and the governor who responded to the Clinton fire and saw that we had an aging radios in our volunteer fire departments and our public safety that are basically end of life. And they're expensive to replace and being volunteer agencies. Todd County currently has 441 radios that are approximately 404 of those radios were purchased before 2011. These radios are no longer supported by Motorola and it's extremely difficult to find parts and used parts to fix and maintain these radios. Our emergency services department rely on the Armor radio system to provide interoperability between the departments at local, regional, state, and federal levels. By supporting this bill, which the letter of support is below, is right now it's in the Public Safety Finance Committee. It was introduced on the 31st, and it's authored by Senator Backer, Hoyt, Thesis, Poston, and Blenley. So right now it has been read into committee, and basically what they're adding is an ability to appropriate grant fundings for purchase of public safety radio system equipment, grants and things like that. What they're doing, and since I don't have, I could put it up on the screen if you want, or I can just read it. For $250 million is appropriated from the State Finance Recovery Fund to a Commissioner of Public Safety for grants to local government units appropriating in the statewide public safety radio communication system established in the Minnesota State Statute, Section 403.36. The grants must be used to purchase portable radios and related equipment that is interoperable with the Allied Radio Matrix for Emergency Response Armor System. Each local government unit may receive only one grant. The grant is cognizant upon a match of at least 5% from non-state funds. The Director of Emergency Communications Network Division, in consultation with the State Emergency Communications Board, must administer the grant program that is appropriately available until June 30th of 2023. So what this letter is doing is we're trying to get support and to move this out of public safety finance and move it up the stream through the entire legislative process. So the letter is Todd County is writing in support of HF 2821 SF 2670. We are writing to urge support of this important public safety initiative. Effective radios are the backbone of public safety in the state of Minnesota. Our first responders, firefighters, and law enforcement personnel depend upon them to effectively perform their jobs. Radios save lives and serve every constituent of the state of Minnesota. Radios that serve the armor system are outdated. In many jurisdictions, they are costly to maintain and replace. We've had several radios that have failed within our fire departments, and they've had to replace them, and they've had to come up with the funding to replace those radios. We've also had them fail in the sheriff's department. In local government units where budgets are tight, it is very difficult to plan for the costly process of replacing the crucial infrastructure. Local government units would urge the state to fund grant program that allows the critical upgrade of radios. We would also encourage sustainable funding support to support ongoing replacement. Our purchase of the original radios was also on grants, so that's kind of one of those pieces that it's a difficult piece to fund. So we're also looking for further support within the radios. Another challenge to replacement radios is the replacing radios is direct impact of the local taxpayers. Radios are critical and employing resource, protecting property and life and protecting our workers. However, they often get overlooked for replacement because they are no existing funding source. In Todd County, there are 441 radios in this statewide armor system. And this is just radios that I am the administrative person to all these radios to make sure that they are handling and maintaining those radios. Most of the radios are used by our small rural emergency departments. There are 8 volunteer fire departments, 4 ambulance services, 2 hospitals, 2 police departments, and the sheriff's office, which includes the countywide dispatch center and emergency management department. Out of the 241 radios, we have approximately 441 radios. We have approximately 404 of these radios that were purchased before 2011. These radios are no longer supported by Motorola, and it is extremely difficult to find parts and replacements. Our emergency services department rely on these radios day in and day out. It's a constant, and that's why we have the redundancies built into the system. The replacement cost of these radios that are at the end of life expectancy ranges between $2,500 to $4,800 each. These expenses does not include radio programming or additional equipment or supplies required to add the radio into the statewide armor system. The additional cost will be approximately $400 per radio. Thank you for your consideration and time on behalf of Todd County. And I made sure we put enough signatures on there that they would like to see them push it through. The cities also have this letter, and I have received a couple of letters from a couple of the cities from the local fire departments to also send on to the representatives.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm the Todd County's representative on this committee, and this has been our concern. All the commissioners talk about how we're going to pay for new radios. This because nobody can do it on their own. No county can do it on their own. It just can't happen.
Yeah, and then with high hopes of getting this through, that we can start getting a funding source to maintaining these radios.
Okay. Do we have a board action in regards to this, Jillian?
Yes.
All right, you've heard the presentation, see the board action in regards for a letter of support. I
So
would look
moved.
for a motion. Motion by Kneisel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. Discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're gonna send this to our local legislators too, not just the bill sponsors, but send it to our local legislators so they see the letter.
I can definitely do that, yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Right.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Policies Committee. Good morning, Sarah.
Morning. Today I'm bringing forward a change to the personnel policy update of Section 7, Article 7, Section 7.01. The Policies Committee has worked to review and update the personnel policy, Article 7, Group Health and Life Insurance. This came to work session 2 weeks ago. Your options would be to approve the resolution or to do not approve the resolution, with the recommendation being to approve the resolution for the adoption of changes to the Todd County Personnel Policies, Article 7, Section 7.01.
Okay, you've seen the board action in regards to the change to the personnel policy. Looking for a motion.
So move.
Motion by Becker. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Standing reports, auditor treasurer.
Just one thing for your radar, that we are hopeful that the state will be releasing the redistricting orders any moment.
I know, they said.
Their original promise was today, the 15th, that the courts would make their final decisions. We await that, and our office hopes to have a presentation ready for you all on March 1st regarding the process that we will have to go through.
Okay, thank you, Jolene. Coordinator?
The only update that I have for you is that at our last department head meeting, we did have another discussion about the use of the American Rescue Plan funds, and you will start seeing, if you haven't, you will see very soon some committee assignments, some committee startings of workings within those committees, getting things scheduled. And just, I again want to reiterate what the board has said, and a thank you to John for being here today.
All right, thank you. Commissioners? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to adjourn for the month of February.
So moved.
Motion by Kneisel. Second
Second.
by Newman. We are adjourned. We will start the work. The solar ordinance discussion.
Okay, think back to a few work sessions ago, the discussion was had to make you guys some informational packets about our ordinance, neighboring ordinances, and some other information we felt was good for you guys to see, to kind of do a review of our existing ordinance. I guess my goal this morning would just be to walk you through what we put together here if you have any initial questions or what other information you'd like to see, so we can make sure to get that to you, and then we can come back to another work session and get this eventually to the planning commission for a full review. So we put together what we thought was the right stuff here. In the first tab, you can see just our local ordinance. The only thing I wanted to point out there is the first page of it, the top 2/3, ignore that. That's section 9.91. So then at the bottom is where section 9.20 starts, which is what you guys would want to be reviewing for this. You can see all the neighboring counties as you go through there. You'll see a lot of similarities with those to our ordinance. Some are much more in-depth than ours, so that'll give you some ideas and thoughts on which direction to go. After that, the Minnesota state statutes related to solar site management. You'll see that that is extremely short, but something to read through. And we found a frequently asked questions document on AMC's website. Chris wanted us to try to find what date that was published, and unfortunately we couldn't find it, so we don't know how old this is, but it is still up on the website. And if you have questions, maybe you'll find something there, or it might trigger another question. But that's a good resource to read through there. I guess the last thing to point out in that last page is a solar toolkit. Jacob found this. They are a consulting service to help local governments develop ordinances. This packet, just this one piece here, was like 32 pages, so we didn't print the whole thing. If you want it, please let me know. We'll get it to you. Otherwise, we did include on the last page a link to where this can be found if you want to look it up online. There's lots of good information in there, and we wanted to see that because one discussion we had was, are we looking to just make some changes to our existing ordinance to include our concern areas, or are we looking to do a full overhaul of our existing ordinance and update it completely? Consulting services, as you'll see in there, are a potential option. We could get potential grant funding to do that through Sourcewell, I believe, kind of a cost-sharing thing, but there are lots of different options on the table of which direction we want to go. My intention, based on what I heard at the last work session, was to just get this information in front of you and allow you time to review it. So with that, if there's any initial questions, or if you think there's other resources you'd like us to get put together for you, include in here, we'd be happy to do that. Outside of that, I don't know that we should go too much further today until you have a time to really digest what's in front of you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we just approved something earlier on a CUP, but I still have a question on why we call something a community solar energy system when we're just doing it for personal use. That term throws me way off.
It does me at times also.
So why are we using that term, community? Why isn't it personal solar system?
If you look through neighboring county ordinances, you'll see similar language. So I'm thinking that these ordinances were developed with some sort of consultant that a lot of neighboring counties use, or use resources from AMC to develop these ordinances. Community refers to an interconnection on the grid. So you have it for personal use, but you are supplying power to off-site resource or other sort, like off-site, so it turns into community, and that's where that term is at.
Okay, my question is, do I have to supply it to an external source?
I don't know that officially, but my understanding is that the way the state statutes or rules are set up now is that you cannot generate energy from alternative sources without giving the excess onto the electric grid. Because the way you can't just harbor that. If there's excess energy, you have to give it up.
Really?
Right. And I think that goes back to the governor's goal of was it 25 by 25 or whatever that is, of renewable resources accomplishing that goal.
And I'm not clarifying this by any means, but I would guess it has in regards to getting grant funding for them, that it has to be tied in like that.
Right. There are significant financial
Okay, but the
benefits.
Compensations.
we just approved, I don't believe there was any grant funding attached to that.
Not grant funding, but they get some sort of subsidy for doing that, and they get the buyback from the electric service provider. So there is a financial benefit on both of those fronts to install those solar panels.
And when you install it, okay, so I'm just gonna go a little further. So if I install a solar panel, who pays for the transmission line connection?
You do.
I don't know the ins and outs of who's paying for what. That is not what we look at. I bet we have resources locally that would be very able to answer that. I'd have to think
I'd
about
like
that.
that answer before we move forward with anything in a,
Right.
in an ordinance, so, because I don't want to force people to have to pay $5,000 if you want a CUP to get a solar panel to heat my house or my little
Sure.
building or whatever, so
I will put some thought into that. I bet we could have local resources that would be willing to come to a work session and talk more about that. But I will look into that.
Mr. Chair, if I could, during AMC annual meeting, I attended a session on solar energy, and it was interesting how they actually had to put their solar energy farms where was a connecting station. It wasn't necessarily where they wanted to build them, but it was where they had to build them for that connecting out service station. And I'm not sure who put that program on for AMC. We should be able to find that out, though. Very, very good presentation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Becker, I can find that out pretty
Yeah.
easily.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, it looks like we have plenty of information to review, and we can come back to another work session and talk about it again.
I got some tasks to complete between now and then, so likely as soon as possible, I'll get it back on the work session agenda.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
State recovery probate discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've been here a couple of times and talked about our probate process that's been ongoing, just getting ready to initiate some of that with our department. At the next board meeting, we're planning to have the auditor's office bring a couple of board action forms, so we just wanted to go over what you can expect.
Okay.
So as part of our next steps, we have to establish a checking account with American Heritage Bank. So that's one of the items that we need the board action for approving us to do that. Then we'll be establishing a new fund in IFS. So that's all working with the auditor's office.
Let's get your mic maybe a little closer.
A little closer?
Yeah, thank you.
Not a problem. Our plan for the checking account that we set up is that we'll transfer $25,000 from the Health and Human Services Fund into the new checking account. And those funds will be used when a state doesn't have any assets available to pay, like the ongoing electricity, that kind of thing. And then that account will always be replenished after the probate is completed. So it's just a working capital account, basically, and it will always go back to the same balance. So there won't be tons of activity in there. We think probably 2 to 4 probates a year. We don't have a lot of them in the county. But then the other board action that we would like to bring is to have the board authorize the director's designee. And that role would be for the person who's going to be the authorized, excuse me, estate administrator, because they'll need, each time a probate is opened, then an individual checking account will be created in the name of that estate, and that's how the funds will be managed for each probate. So what that board action would just basically say that you are giving the authority to the director's designee to open those accounts on an as-needed basis. And then I do have just what kind of activity will happen in those accounts, and that would be expenses would be paid on behalf of the estate. The staff time that is spent administering these and also attorney fees incurred is reimbursed out of that estate. Any county burial that was paid by the county, we would be able to refund that, and then the remaining money will go as medical assistance recovery. Do you have any questions for us about this process?
If I could, who would you, director's designee, who would that be?
Well, at the start, it's Carrie in, right
Okay.
now. We don't want to name a specific name because as
Okay.
positions change. But at the start of each probate action, then that person will be designated by Jackie. So
Okay.
that will be part
So
of the
could you have more
process.
than one? If you have more than one estate going at one time, or would the same person be all the way through? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
There could be a time when I would be designated. You know, I can't think
Yeah.
there would be anyone else at this point. Carrie's not planning to leave us for a long time, so.
Long, long, long time.
Deny it.
Yes, we'll be expecting denial at the board level.
Nice. Questions, commissioners?
I did want to just give a quick shout out for our MA recovery program. For 2021, we collected $820,000. So roughly as a reminder, the county keeps about 25% of that money. So that's been helpful to county levy, definitely.
Where's the rest go?
The state and federal.
Well, I should have
Yep.
known that.
They get their share.
Pardon me.
So we'll be working on those two board actions and plan to have those coming from the auditor's office at the next board meeting.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
For the checking account that you want to establish, are there any rules requiring that any interest on the account go to MA or to some other fund? Because I know for legal trust accounts, for example, there's rules about where the interest goes, and it's very.
There are, and so our account will not be an interest-bearing account.
Okay.
Yep.
My other question is, for the signatures, after you authorize the director's designee, will you have some sort of double signature or security in place, so it's not just one person?
For a signature authority on the checking accounts, that will not be the main checking account. The signature authority would be Denise, Jackie, or myself.
Okay,
And then on the individual estate accounts, I think we could either do an either-or situation, or I wasn't thinking of two signatures on one check, but if that's something you recommend.
I think it'd be really smart,
Okay.
just to avoid
Yep.
trouble.
We are also planning that all of the probates will be considered supervised probates, so that's where the judge is supervising
Right.
each step of the way.
Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
All right. Any other questions, commissioners? All right, we'll look forward to your
All right,
board actions.
thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Broadband. County Coordinator Rick Utek.
The right first.
Yes, please.
Not the left first, the right first.
Okay, so we were asked, Rick and I were asked to bring forward some information to the board from our meeting that we had last Monday night with Todd County Development Corporation. So I've put together just very brief information to have this discussion, and Rick is here also to kind of go through this with me. So the reason why we're here, as I stated, is the Todd County Development Corporation had a broadband meeting last Monday evening at the Browerville Community Center. The commissioners that sit on that board are Commissioner Kneisel and Commissioner Kircher, and we also had Commissioner Becker in attendance at that meeting. So the purpose of that meeting was to hear what the efforts were that were taking place by the Todd County Coalition on Broadband, and that's really a group of citizens and business owners, professionals, township and city officials, and the other people that are listed up there. The people that specifically spoke at that meeting was Tyler Hoffman from Hartford Township, and also Ken Hovitt had some input at that meeting as well. They expressed the need for broadband, that we are routinely overlooked in broadband projects. The majority of Todd County does not meet the 2022 broadband goals, and we are currently ranked number 82 of 87 for availability of high-speed broadband for the lowest rating. So what the coalition shared with us is that they've gone through a 16-week coursework it's called the Accelerator Program, put on through the Blandin Foundation. And that, going through that program has helped them understand the steps in attaining broadband for their locations. So they've created a website presence, and they've also created a social media presence that's gaining some traction. In 2 weeks, it had 28 followers. They have created a survey and a postcard to promote the survey participation, and they're also working with the U of M on having the survey availability online. And that is actually up and running. I think they're still tweaking the survey a little bit, but it's out there. They've also identified some partners that they've worked with on funding sources, and you see those listed there as the Initiative Foundation, Sourcewell, Lakewood Health, City of Hewitt, and then they're getting some administrative support from the City of Bertha. So the information that was presented there, I had GIS put together some data just for the townships so they could better understand where they're sitting with their served and unserved and underserved areas. And then also there's this area called RDOF area, which is area that is served through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund grant program, and it's been awarded to LTD to serve these areas. That's important to note, because when townships, counties, whoever, entities are looking for funding to do these very expensive broadband projects, this RDOF area is off limits when we look at federal funding, because they've already been considered funded through the other grant process. And when we look at the information here, the total address sites per township, and we look at the unserved, the underserved, and the served, it's important to keep in mind that these numbers are self-reported by the providers. So when we look at areas of underserved or served, it's the providers doing that reporting. So the data may be a little bit different than what the customer is actually experiencing, if I could put it that way. And what's considered served is 100 by 20 meg, and underserved is the 25 by 3, and unserved is if you don't meet that 25 by 3. And this is the area of concern, a big area that gets talked about a lot, that RDOF area, and there's just over 2,000 addresses within that RDOF area. These would be addresses that could not be served through federal grant programs. So these are a couple of things that we shared at that meeting with the townships that were present. So after we heard the progress of the coalition and listened to the other information that was presented, the Development Corporation had some recommendations to bring forward. The recommendation was to really help these townships and anybody within Todd County who's trying to bring broadband into the area, help in the funding of the survey. So whatever survey funding requirements or needs that they have, that the county would potentially partner with that funding, assist with promoting the survey, and we could do that by assisting with any of the advertising that needs that they might have. Doing the survey is going to get us a better understanding of what our actual broadband needs are. We know that a survey was completed sometime between 2009 and 2011. I don't have the results of that survey, and I'm not quite sure what happened with those survey results, what additional broadband was brought in because of that. So there's a request to have another survey done. The information from that survey is then going to prepare us to have a feasibility study done, and it's going to help us understand the additional resources needed to carry out this project, which may lead to additional resources such as a consultant, somebody who has the expertise to carry that forward. So the next steps, as I see them, are that I continue and Rick continues to work with that coalition and their partners to see what are their immediate needs. There's some discussion within the coalition that maybe they just promote this survey through their means that they have in mind, which is to do a postcard, get that out to every single resident within the county, and that postcard would lead them to the survey. You might see a QR code on that postcard, which you could use your phone that would direct you right to the survey page, or it would provide the address. So there's some discussion that maybe just assisting with promoting that survey. There's also been some discussion that maybe we want to get this survey out, actually physically out to every single resident. And that comes at a higher price tag than what the coalition is looking at with just promoting through a postcard. That full survey printed and sent to each individual household would also have a return mail attached to it. So there's some additional costs, and the townships are not necessarily prepared to have that entire cost on them. There will be costs in advertising, and then there will be some additional manual processes included if we are sending out a physical paper and people send that back. So a means to get that information tallied. And then the hope would be, after having these discussions with the coalition and the other partners, we would bring a formal funding request forward to the board. So that's what took place with that meeting, and I am here today just to get a feel from the board on if they would like to hear more information about this. Would you like to see some more formal costs come forward as a funding request from this coalition group and from the Economic Development Board?
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I attended a meeting along with Gary and Commissioner Becker, and I spoke a little bit at the meeting about back in 2000, I don't remember when, but it was about 2004, somewhere's in there, 2005, when we were given funding to implement a 911 system. I was sheriff at the time, and the development and all that was way over my head, so I approached the county board and asked if we could hire a GIS or MIS person to develop the program and help implement it, and they did approve that, and we did that. I suggested at the meeting that with broadband, I believe we've kicked this can down the road. Matter of fact, I don't even know if we have a can left. We're not making any progress, period. So I've made the suggestion and said maybe we should look at using our ARPA funds to hire a broadband person to facilitate this county in making some progress and getting things accomplished, because otherwise I feel Chris could well do it, but her plate is so full. We talked about that at her evaluations. She's got enough to do. I think she's got enough headaches to worry about. Doesn't have the time to dedicate it to it, and I believe if we hired a person to dedicate their time to this and work at it full-time, I think we could make some good progress. So I'm just planting a seed for you commissioners to think about when we're talking about our ARP funds and what we want to do with them, so.
Other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In the Solid Waste Committee, we've been working on preparing a survey to send out to all the residents within the county, basically in 911 addresses, I believe, or partials. And we should have a pretty good idea what it's going to cost to do that. So if we do that first and then come back to you guys and say, okay, this is what the initial cost would be to send a survey out, you guys can ask, we can ask all those questions, you know? Will the county support another person in this position? You know, how are we gonna get the providers to work with us? That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
You know, if we can get the providers to work with us and not fight with each other, I think it would be a no-brainer, but we're competing against multi-million-dollar corporations that don't want to play ball. So, but anyways, get back to the survey with solid waste. We could give you guys an idea what it's going to cost.
Yep, so, Mr. Chair, if I can, Commissioner Newman, this is what has been presented through our Solid Waste Committee. So the cost of the actual form that would be designed is just over $3,000 for 11,988 of these specific forms. And then the mailing costs of that is just to right around that $4,000. And then on top of that, what we would need to obtain is a business reply mail permit. And that's going to give us the best, the lowest rate on getting those returns back. And we're only charged for the ones that actually come back. We're not charged for every single one that we're charged on the sending out, but we only get charged for the ones that come back in the return. And that's for every 1,000 pieces, $690. The difference between this specific survey and a survey such as the broadband one, this one we were able to nail it down to like 10 to 12 questions on the solid waste survey. The survey for broadband was pretty extensive. I mean, it was, I want to say 4 or 5 pages. So the cost might look a little bit different. I would anticipate we would have more pages within the broadband survey.
Mr. Chair, if I could they not narrow down their survey? You get a survey too long, people aren't apt to fill it out to begin with.
And that's the discussions that, excuse me, I would like to continue to have with that coalition. Is there a way that we could maybe streamline it so people would really want to take that survey knowing that it's only going to take them 5-10 minutes to complete versus
Pages.
so just getting what are the real questions you want to get at? I mean, maybe
Exactly
narrow
right.
it down without taking away anything that they're really looking for within the survey
Mr. Chair,
data.
that $800, that permits for a whole year, we can use it for the broadband one too. We wouldn't have to pay it another $800.
Yes, this could be used-
Good for a year, ain't it? Yeah.
Yep.
So I have some questions. Coordinator Pelzer and I spoke about this, and I'm gonna come across as the negative Nancy, but I'm gonna call it reality. How many people do we think will respond to this survey? What percentage will we look for as a comeback from this survey? Are we gonna look at a 10%?
25% is usually your max.
Won't happen.
I don't,
So we're gonna poll a large number of people and get a
12,000.
real small percentage back. And the people that will probably respond are the ones that are interested. Because I will speak for me, and me being Hickville, I have it in front of my house available and don't use it and don't have a need for it. That's not saying I'm against it, but I'm also saying a proponent of why should I pay for it if I don't see a need for it? So the other 75% of those survey people are people where you may drag it past their driveway, but it's not going to their house. Just a point of view.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I will add, I think, that's true, but I will say that if you have access to high-speed broadband, it improves you're able to more easily sell your home if you decide to sell and move, because people moving in, that's one of the first questions they ask right now: what is your speed? What do you have available for broadband? And it's so important right now for a lot of people, but some people move in, may not.
the other thing we talked about at that meeting was brought up was, Lakeshore residents who are not full-time residents here, who are used to that down in the cities of high speed, that come out of the areas where they're at, and they come up here and we have nothing. Now, the survey would not cover them, if I'm correct.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kircher, the discussion that we had that night and the question that was asked from the Zoom virtual setting was, I'm not a Todd County resident, I won't get that physical survey, how can I participate? And you would participate by going to that website. You would participate by going to the website and taking the survey.
You know that website's there.
Yep. And there could be special promotion for those addresses, and maybe they've already considered that through this coalition. But they definitely wanted to get the input from those, even though you're not a Todd County resident, what is your need? They wanted the input from anybody who has a broadband need within Todd County.
And if I may, again, the state came out with, take this test on your internet to see what your speeds are. What did they do with it?
I'm not sure what the results are.
So, and again, we're taking another survey. We took a survey before, we're taking another survey, the state has taken a survey. What does it take to get these people off from home plate to get their hind ends to run around the base here and get something done? they want all this data, but they do nothing with the data but sit there and, well, probably file it away, say, well, we'll wait another year and try it again. And to me, surveys are a waste, because I'm like, Rod, if I get a survey, guess what I usually do with it? It goes in file 13, because I don't do it. But I don't know, I just think we've given them enough information. Let's put the pressure on and say, let's get some funding. We need it, we know we need it. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, yeah, we did another survey and everybody wants it. I can drive around here and ask everybody, do you want it? Yes, I want it. I want it for my business, I want it for my home. Okay, then why isn't the state doing something? Well, the federal government says we'll give you all kinds of money, but they put all kinds of rules with it. But our state is doing, I don't think, very much. Now, they are talking about some broadband funding, but it's minimal. It's nothing. It's a carrot to wave in front of you to get a little bit started, and there it sits again. So, I'm sorry, but
There is federal funding out there. A lot of these deadlines for funding, they either are very near or they have come and gone, and there will be more funding opportunities. We know that broadband is, I mean, they're putting a lot of money into broadband. It's the providers that need to, most of the time, it's the providers that need to go after that funding. And having good survey data could allow organizations like that coalition to bring that data forward to those providers and say, see, this is what we have for speed. And understanding that the providers are the ones who have submitted data, served, underserved, and unserved. They have self-reported that data. So in an effort
showing us
to.
the map all the time.
Yep, but in an effort to show what is the need, the coalition and others within the townships feel we need this survey, and we need to actually do something with the data once we get the survey results.
And the data is important to writing grants.
The data is important if you do something with it.
how many grants have we written?
I have not written a grant for broadband specifically. I have others, but not for broadband.
Mr. Chair, if I could. Chris, can you put us back to that one with the township on? I have a question. When we did CTC out in Moran Township, which was through a grant, we ran into roadblocks where they could only go so far, and at such point, they were blocked, that they could not go any, that's correct. And you had where it was served, unserved. Okay, I'm wondering if this RD, whatever, DF address sites, because I always thought there was a line, and Chris and I have been talking a lot, and there are no more lines that they cannot cross over, and yet they're designated as we cannot get grant funding for these areas. That's what we gotta work on, is to get these areas relieved of this grant funding so other providers can step in and do this. I mean, to me, that's the roadblock right there. It's working with the providers that say they have this area covered and they're not working on the area, and no one else can come into the area.
It's all federal money, it's USDA.
So how do we go about getting this blockage removed? Because until that's removed, we can't move on it.
Part of what we did our first meeting earlier in the year, we actually had, actually it was November 1st we had the meeting. And I encourage people to write the FCC. Write them, do an email.
And is that, instead of doing a survey, should we have these people writing letters to say, this is blocked, we cannot get a provider to come into our area because it says it has federal funding, and therefore no one can go into that area? And we see it happening all the time.
What do you think the FCC would do if they got a letter from Barb Becker from Todd County?
Well,
The
get it from the counties. I mean, we wrote the CTC personal letters. What do they come back at, Rick?
And when they do a grant like that, that was 85% matching grant for Moran Township. They
Yes,
put the border just on the west side of the town hall,
yes.
that grant. And it's kind of weird on how they do that, how they set areas for these grant.
But the people
the boundaries for
outside
grant
that
areas.
boundary wanted to have CTC come in. TCC at that time could have dug that area in, but they were already pre-funded by Arvik. Arvik would not let them cross the line. I mean, they're not very far away, and we could not get it to their place. So there's a blocking agent in there that we have to deal with before we can move forward.
And the cooperatives will not go into Arvik's area.
Yeah.
So I have another question and a point that I looked at or whatever, and with this funding or whatever you can apply for with the providers, with the federal government, with whatever, there's always, of course, a Todd County portion that comes into play here. What's our return on that money? What are we getting back for those dollars spent? I think that's something that we always look at with a lot of other funding things that we do through the county, is we're looking at return dollars for what we get for what we spend. What are we getting back?
I guess, Rod, but being on the Economic Development Board, what we look at is, you're right, a dollar of return, but, you know, we look for attraction and sustainability. If you can't attract a business, like I believe we should be trying to attract businesses, if they look at your speeds in your county, they say, no, that's not gonna work for our business. If we attract businesses, our return is great because we develop a stronger workforce, a bigger workforce, and a product coming out of our county. So that's what I look at for broadband. It ain't necessarily me for that home, but it's for the businesses to attract. The schools, I think, in our county, I think have pretty good speeds right now, and I think a lot of people look at the education system when they want to move into a county or a city, but I think what we should be looking at is trying to attract businesses to come here. We have a lot of land. I think we have the workforce, but we can't get a business to come, so.
Mr. Chair, if I could maybe just add, if we look at what is your return on investment, you can't always attach a dollar figure to it, so I'm going to just speak to pandemic terms, which is not always the most popular topic, but we do know that there were many kids from kindergarten all the way through high school who had to be at home for distance learning, and we can't quantify how many parents had to maybe take their children, sit outside the park, or did they have to sit outside another building to allow that student to get their work done? And I think that the county has somewhat good coverage for cellular, so you get that cellular service maybe through a hotspot, but there's some pockets of the county that just are dead. So if you don't have an opportunity for fast enough internet to do your schoolwork or to maybe work from home or whatever the case might be, and you don't have an option for cellular, you're kind of really in a dead spot. And I think even like we had talked, if targeting even those specific areas to know where are the truly unserved of the county and where are the underserved, and even make the priority list based on that.
And again, don't want to come as the negative Nancy, but I think those numbers were exceptionally low, if I'm not mistaken, through the school districts when they supplied hotspots for the kids to do their homework. And if they didn't get that, I believe they mailed out Dave Kircher's paper copy to the ones that maybe weren't served that way. So there is other alternatives. And I think we also have to look at, what is wireless going to do? We're talking about one of the fastest changing businesses out there when it comes to wireless. Are we going to pull all these things in the ground and 2 years later throw them out because we're faster wireless? I don't know that, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a point we have to look at.
I think, Mr. Chair, in order to have wireless, you have to have fiber in the ground. So fiber has to be there to do the wireless for cell towers and everything.
Towers?
Yes, yeah. Yes, correct. And I think that, I go back to the point though, when people look at places, you know, moving in from, let's say, the metro or anything, looking at rural places to live, that's the first question they ask is, do you have high speed internet enough for me to do my work? A lot of the wireless is limited by data. So if they do a lot of work over the, their phone or their hotspot, then they are limited, they use up all their data. So it is, there's kind of a, wireless has a great place out there, and that's probably where maybe some of the areas will need wireless, because, you know, houses are a mile apart.
Right.
But it definitely helps to have fiber, especially for a lot of these businesses that need the bandwidth. We had my former board chair, he has a business, and it's in the Twin Cities, and he can't work out of his home just west of Burrowville because he doesn't have the bandwidth to do it, and he's on a tower system. So it depends on what the business. We have a person who works for Microsoft north of Staple, or west of Staples, and he was having a heck of a problem. Once he got West Central Telephone in there for high speed, he got rid of, he was paying $2,000 a month for his service because he needed it. But now he's able to do his work from home without, you know, through, I think it was CenturyLink he did that through, I believe, you know, to pay that. He had to pay so much to have the line put in, then he had to be on a contract for so long. But it's important for school. I think it's important for a lot of things. But yeah, it's a balancing act for all this too.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Rick, how about satellite internet? The kids in Colorado all have satellite. Where's that going? Is
Well,
that
there's high
in the
orbiting
future?
like HughesNet, and there's low orbiting like Elon Musk, Starlink. And that, it's good, but it can be affected by weather, you know, shut down by weather. Starlink has already had some issues where they're starting to limit in high density areas, limit the amount of bandwidth you can get. And I think last month they launched 49 satellites, 40-year coming crashing to the ground. Electrical thing that happened. But, you know, they're low orbiting, so they won't be up there as long, so they have to keep replacing them. So it's a new technology. It's a technology I really don't have a lot of expertise on, but we don't know yet on Starlink. They have to have a grid of satellites to go across because you need to lock into more than one satellite to use the service on that. You probably see them going across the sky. It looks like a string of
Big string of lights.
yeah.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Or
Well, Mr. Chair, you gotta look at it too. Look how many landlines are left. I mean, you look at the phone book, and the phone book is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. When I was a kid, that damn phone book was big. So, as a provider, why would you wanna run internet to somebody if they're not gonna bundle? You know? I mean, my bundle's $230 a month. And of that portion, Todd County does get their, what, 0.5%? Yep. Okay, out of that. So anyways, the point is, you know, the provider's gotta make money, otherwise they're not gonna do it. But then again, it goes back to the provider's also gotta play to put it in. So, you know, it's a little different between broadband and electricity. Now, you shut somebody's power off, the 5 of us will get a call, you know, and with their phone, they're gonna say, you know what, I don't want another $40 a month payment. I'm just gonna use my cell phone because I can get more crap on this thing. Yeah, so, I don't know, it's tough, but I agree, some businesses gotta have broadband. You know, there's a necessity out there, but again, it goes back to getting everybody to play ball, and we're just small people here. It's the feds and the state legislators that control everything. And we can squeal as much as we want to them, and, you know, they don't wanna do anything, it won't get done.
So, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, I'm going to continue to work with, if the board wishes this, I will continue to work with the coalition and with the accelerator group and see what their actual needs are as far as funding and bring that request back to the board, if that's appropriate. They are looking at alternative funding sources. The list was long. I don't know what their need directly is. They're also reaching out to other townships to see what kind of funding they can get together collectively.
Mr. Chair, I was looking back, I'm trying to find where Chris's, for this ARPA funding, where the committee assignments are, but do we have a broadband?
We don't have a specific broadband committee, but we do have an infrastructure committee that is set up that includes economic development and public works. Broadband is infrastructure. That would be the perfect place for that discussion.
Okay. I would like to see that happen.
Okay, that's how we'll move forward.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep,
You can switch to.
ARPA money.
Tag team here. The big acronym.
Yeah, how you say that one?
ARP slurf.
Yep. So the County Auditor Treasurer's Office, along with the coordinator here, has put together an update for discussion regarding the ARP funding. So I'll travel through the background, I suppose.
Sure.
Back almost a year ago, in March 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law, which established the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, long-winded acronym for us. Todd County was awarded 4.7 and change million of these funds. U.S. Treasury released then an interim final rule in May of 2021 to guide our decision-making through this time. And there's been many subsequent FAQ documents also released from Treasury as well for our study. Todd County received our first tranche, our first half of the funding on September 30th, and we anticipate the second tranche to come this fall, near that same date. On November 24th, Todd County then filed its interim report, which was required on this funding through U.S. Treasury, listing the obligations and expenditures that existed to date at that time. In December, the board adopted an ARPA SLFRF work plan policy to determine some procedures on how we want to move forward with utilizing these funds in an organized manner. And those committees and processes were established at that time. So what's new at this point? In early January, the U.S. Treasury adopted now their final rule, which takes effect on April 1st. But counties do have the ability to take advantage of the new provisions within the final rule prior to their effective date. This final rule provides for some greater flexibility with a new approach to specifically the category of revenue loss, which is one of the 6 categories to report under this reporting. The counties can allocate up to $10 million of their total recovery fund allocation to spend on government services, or the counties can choose to calculate actual revenue loss through the Treasury's formula, but we have to pick only one approach and use that approach for the remainder of this funding opportunity. Utilizing the bulk allocation would simplify the reporting requirements for counties if we use that standard allowance. Chris, feel free to jump in at any time here. There are 6 different categories under the ARP SLFRF that we have to report. Again, one of those categories is the revenue loss. The others are included in there of premium pay, broadband, water, sewer infrastructure, public health response, negative impacts, etc.
I will jump in.
thank you.
So, the reason why we're having this discussion really has to do with this upcoming report that is due April 30th. And that's why there's so much involvement between the auditor's office and myself at this time, because in order for the auditor's office to report on use of the funds, we need to know which direction we're gonna take. Are we gonna continue to use the funds in all of the individual categories, which has some pretty heavy reporting that goes with that, and a lot of rule sets that go along with that as well? Or do we really want to take a serious look at the replacing lost revenue category, which on the screen you can see that you can use it for a broader scope than what is identified in the 6 categories. So you can use it for general government services, which is pretty much, from what we've learned from NACO, any service that you provide today, you can use the funds for those purposes. And the way that we can do that is to take the option of revenue loss. So you see the list of government services that are included. Feel free to flip it. They still have restrictions on the funds, so you can't use them for any pension funds. You can't use them for a debt service payment. You can't use them for a rainy day or a reserve account. So we couldn't say, okay, we're gonna take these funds and we're just going to put them in our reserves. That's not the intent of the funds. The intent is to further mitigation with COVID. So the intent is not to just hang on to the money, and you can't use it for settlement agreements, judgments, or those types of things. You can't do anything that goes against the mitigation of COVID, and you can't do anything that would violate the terms or conditions of the uniform guidance. Which also leads to a conclusion that I've reached out to several coordinators, administrators, and also listened to the NACO guidance again, and it does appear that we have to follow all of the federal rules when using the funds, even if we do take it as a revenue loss. So we still need to play by the federal rules.
As Chris reiterated, the reason we're bringing this forward for discussion and contemplation today is that counties under 250,000 residents that received less than $10 million in total are required to submit our first, I like to call it the official report. The interim report was just a snapshot in time of where we were at last November. This April report is now our true first official report by the end of April, and that will cover the period between March 3rd of 2021 through March 31st of 2022, and then we'll report annually after that. So we have to make our decision on how we wish to proceed forward for reporting purposes timely. So the next steps for the board is to determine if we're going to utilize this revenue loss to maximize the flexibility in the use of the funds. As Chris has stated before, it provides us more flexibility for the use of the funds. It also alleviates some of the subrecipient monitoring and agreements that had to be in place with previous fundings like this, and the reporting requirements are definitely more streamlined.
So if I could just kind of add a little bit onto that subrecipient agreements and monitoring. If you look back to the CARES Act funding that we received, when we entered into grant agreements or offered grants to some of our nonprofits, specifically 2 schools and Great River Regional Library, we needed to have subrecipient monitoring agreements in place, and that really became a complex, laborsome process, and we need to monitor those entities for 3 years. So it just adds an extra burden whenever we offer grant agreements to other entities.
At this point, the board could determine to take the full amount of the allocation or take a portion of the funds up to what we have already allocated for particular projects to date.
So
That
what
is a
that,
choice of the board.
Yep, and what that really means is we can't take up to 10 million. We can take up to our allotment, which is the 4.79 million in full revenue loss, or we can say we've spent, as a example, $500,000 to date. We're going to continue that with our regular reporting into the categories, and then everything going forward would be revenue loss. Those are two different examples. So it's only your full allotment that you got. It's not 10 million, it's the 4.79 that we're dealing with. And then do we take that full amount or do we focus on what we have not already allocated?
So then kind of next step will be looking for some kind of board action brought forward with some options, I would guess. Is that correct?
Yes, and from speaking with Jolene, she would like to have that completed before the April 1st implementation of the rule. Even though we can retro, we want to do that before that April 1st deadline because her first report is due April 30th.
And the reporting period for the activity closes on March 31st. So having this decision happen during that time period allows us to include that in the year's worth of time reporting for the April submission.
So this would come forward at one of the two board meetings.
I'm sorry, Jackie, did you have your hand up?
Question I would have, should we hold on our committee work until we've designated, or?
It does, Mr. Chair, I don't think it changes moving forward on bringing projects. This is just, this allows more flexibility. It doesn't remove what we can do, but it allows us even greater flexibility.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I could?
Yep.
On that December 10th, 2021, and I got the board action form in front of me, we put together our work, our leads and our commissioners, our committees, so forth. And now our committees have changed. This was brought in front and voted on the board at the time. When we did this planning, was part of it at the time, we put commissioners in by districts and not by name so that that district would not and these committees would not change. And that was the intent of putting them in. We also did not list anybody's name as HH director, whatever county engineer, because it went to that entity, not to that person. My question is, why is it now changed?
Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify, I have sent to the commissioners a little bit more clarification on who those specific people are, even though you already know that. The only thing that may have changed is finance. Everything else has stayed the same. And that change was really a discussion with Denise, Jolene, and myself. Nothing has changed. I've attached a name for ease of use.
But finance did change, and my question is, the chair and vice chair are on the financial budgeting, so forth. Why would you take District 1 and District, whatever it was, I think it was 4, right? Financial and administration? I don't think that has anything to do with the chair and vice chair. With working with these, they see the total budget and so forth going forward. Ours is just a committee. And it was passed by the whole board. So would it not have to come back in front of the commissioners to change that?
The committee
It was
listing that you
a
got.
resolution.
Yep, and I can absolutely correct that. It was an early discussion that I had with Denise and Jolene, so I'm glad that they shared that with you, so.
No one shared it with me. You shared it with me with your letter when you did your, whatever to the commissioners, you had it on there, on the bottom of the letter that you sent me.
I did, I attached that committee
Yes,
listing.
you did.
Yep.
And that's why I bring it forward.
And I apologize, I can definitely clear that up, and that's probably something we can do maybe through chair and vice chair.
I guess I would just as soon stay on the committee.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Anything else? If not, I think we'll end the work session agenda.